To the interesting portion of the southern end of the bay. We're going to pass by a lot of companies related to the maritime industry in Seattle. First company we're going to pass by is Todd Shipyards. Todd was once primarily a shipbuilding company. Did a lot of work with the Navy during First and Second World Wars. But by the time the Second World War was over, the demand for American-made ships had decreased dramatically. So in order to stay in business, Todd switched their focus to vessel maintenance and repair, which is what they still focus on today. They do, however, still have a good reputation with government agencies, specifically the Navy, the United States Coast Guard, and the Washington State Ferry System. You'll see ships from all three of those agencies here quite often. Today we have one of the Coast Guard icebreakers up in dry dock. This is a Polar class icebreaker, the Polar Star. She looks like she's in rough shape, but they're just trying to chip away as much of the paint as they can, so they can do a good paint job. It's really not that bad. There's a sister ship, Polar Seas, over at dock at the Coast Guard Station. We're going to pass by that a little later on, so you'll get to see what it looks like when it's actually fit to float and all kinds of stuff. This big white ball, as I mentioned briefly before, is a very powerful radar system from the Missile Defense Agency. It's a sea-based X-band radar. It is essentially powerful enough to look from right here. It can see all the way across the continent. It can pick out something as small as a baseball in the sky. It can also differentiate threats between actual real-life missiles and decoys. I don't know how it does it, but apparently it can. At that point, it can send that information directly to the Missile Defense Agency, which will then automatically send it to the launching of an interceptor missile, which can pluck the real threat out of the sky. It's pretty cool. Now, this is sea-based. This thing floats. It's floating right now, actually. It's also, and this is what surprised me, entirely self-propelled. This thing can move around by itself. It looks clunky, it looks awkward, and it's not very fast. It can go about 8 knots, which is roughly 10 to 12 miles an hour. So it's not very fast, but it can move, which is pretty cool. It's on an old oil platform, essentially, and it's semi-submersible. So in case of rough sea conditions, it actually lowers itself about halfway down, gives a lower center of gravity, and makes it more able to withstand those rough squalls. How long have we had it? It's been here for roughly a month now. It's just going through minor repair work. It'll be here likely through the end of the summer, so especially if you're from the area, if you live here, get used to this. It's going to be around here for a little while. Where is it usually? I've heard conflicting reports that its home base is either in a station in Hawaii or in Alaska. However, what everybody can seem to agree on is that it spends most of its time just roaming the Pacific Ocean. Next up, we got a green and black barge. This is the Whittier provider. Barges are usually uninteresting. I don't like to talk about them. They're just things that float and hold stuff. But this one, however, is pretty cool. You can see that there are containers up on top of it, but they're elevated off of that main deck. That main deck actually houses 6 to 8 rows of railroad tracks. Essentially, it's a floating train. They can drive the train directly onto this barge. Once it's all filled up, the tugboat's going to grab it and take it all the way up to Alaska. Once it gets to Alaska, they can essentially just drive the train off the other end in a dock that looks exactly like this one. Now, for the most part, this is how mainland United States resupplies the state of Alaska. There's a couple of reasons why they do it this way, instead of saying just taking the railroad all the way to Alaska from here. First of all, that means you have to go through Canada. And as much as I like Canada, go Canucks. Yeah, all right. I totally got distracted there.
You like Canada?
Canada. Okay, as much as I like Canada, that means you gotta pay import tariffs when you enter, you gotta pay export tariffs when you leave, and it ends up costing a ridiculous amount of money just to ship to another part of the country. Now, however, probably a much bigger reason is that many of the cities and towns in Alaska are completely inaccessible by land. A lot of the terrain is just too rough, and there is no one railroad track that connects the city of Seattle to many of the major cities in Alaska. So going by sea or by air is really the only feasible way to do it. Now, everything I've been talking about since I hopped back on the mic over by Todd Shipyards, all the stuff that we've been saying has been located on Harbor Island. Harbor Island is actually man-made. It's about 400 acres. It was built at the very beginning in the 1900s by the Army Corps. years. Now, we are currently heading into the eastern waterway of the Duwamish River, which was dredged out by the Army Corps of Engineers around the same time. Essentially, during the early 1900s, the early residents of Seattle thought that this would be a great area to build a port at the mouth of the river here. They thought it was nice and sheltered down here. The mouth of the river was nice and wide. It was unfortunately way too shallow, so they, during this dredging project, they essentially took everything they found at the bottom of the riverbed, piled it all up on top of the middle, and created this 400-acre island out of it. At the time of its construction, Harbor Island was easily the largest man-made island in the world. It's not anymore. It's down to number 4. There are larger islands in Japan, specifically in Kobe, Japan. There's one in Dubai as well. But this one is fairly well constructed. I always like to point out that the top 5 largest man-made islands in the world, Harbor Island is the only one that isn't slowly sinking or falling apart. It is very well constructed. It's been here for a long time, and it'll continue to be here for a long time. Now, the Eastern Waterway, which